much older than me, so I won't call him my friend, but distinguished politician, family friend, Thiru Shankar, Mrs. Iyer. The Dr. Anubopana of the Association, Professor Hamsa Balakrishnan, the Associate Dean. If I missed anybody, my apologies. To be part of this very opening today. Welcome, good evening. Thank you for having me here. And only after I walked in here, I recognized that I've been in this hall before. I come every so often, such a huge campus, I lose track of where I've been. But as I was coming, I was thinking to myself, I've had the luxury now in the last couple of weeks of being chief guest or guest of honor at half a dozen campus events, including alumni events at the College of Engineering, Gindi, one of the oldest engineering, in fact, the oldest engineering college in India. My own REC Trichy, now called NIT Trichy, here, and then colleges of very different nature like Stella Maris and WCC and Ethiraj and all these things. And I was thinking, what is it that creates great institutions? How do we, sometimes they're able to do it in 20, 25 years, sometimes it takes 50, 60, sometimes 30, 75. How do you create institutions where you set the bar very high and you create a culture and sustain a culture so that whoever passes through it can be in some way shaped and identified to that institution? Because at the end of it, buildings are buildings, land is land. People are very important, but people are transient. Even the longest serving professors or administrators, don't serve for more than a couple of 3 or 4 decades. And then these institutions last 100, 150, 200 years to be centers of excellence. And I think, of course, there are many answers, but part of it has to be about creating a particular culture own way, even those of excellence. They have some things in common, but every institution is different. I was just about 3 or 4 days ago, +20 years ago, for the same institution. However, that more acknowledged and respected and therefore supported are things like expanding even the greatest technical institutions into the social sciences archives. I think these are now becoming very, very well recognized. In fact, I was reminded of 2 things that about a year ago I took my son on a college tour of the US, and I spoke at many colleges, and I also took him to other colleges where I wasn't speaking, but because of my good friend Dr. Duflo, Professor Duflo had asked me to speak at my old school. And so I said, why don't you just go and attend the campus tour? It was November or something of 23, I think, or maybe 25, lost track, 23. And it so happened I had a little time, so I went and sat with him, and I was shocked when the student who was leading the tour, she said, just so you know, if you come to MIT, it doesn't matter what major you take. You can take nuclear engineering, you can take astrophysics, you will have to take so many courses in the humanities in your first year. And that's, coming from one of the premier institutions in technology in the world. And I must say that I had slightly broader education than Raghu because he never saw the social sciences. But when I was at the Sloan School, one of the courses I remember the most was a course called Literature, Ethics and Authority. And it was so fascinating. It used not a single new text, all existing texts, movies, the 12 Angry Men, Moby Dick, Julius Caesar, to examine the nature of power, of authority, of influence, of shaping outcomes, and the kind of notion of reliable. So to do with memory with, in this case, anthropology archives. So that's good, I think. That institutions of all types, not just universities, but universities are natural homes for archives. But every culture, every good archive, I think. And sometimes when I look around me, I feel like relative to the Europeans, relative to some of the best archivists of the last, let's say, 10 centuries, Tamil society has not been so good at creating archives. We have brilliant literature. We have things that last, poetry and treatises of language or linguistics that last for years. But if you look at the actual historical archives, there's a lot of things we're discovering. Go to Kiladi, which is every year we discover another layer and another 100 years back, and much of this is not recorded anywhere. Only after we discover and we start sending it for and all that. None of our ancestors really thought about perpetuating memory, before the age of computers and permanent kind of storage. Archives were the only way to pass things down. So I think for all these reasons, I'm very happy to be part of this event, to be here to help inaugurate it. It's going to last a couple of months here. That's great. I must say, as a minister, I get invited to a lot of things, but it's a rare occasion when I come to a project where I've been a part of it, because Professor Iyer had her student interview me, I don't know, about a year and a half ago as part of the project. And I think somewhere there may be a 30 or 60-second clip of where in the archive. So I'm very happy. For all these reasons, I think it is indicative of things that we need to do, maybe not so well, but we need to do. I'm very, very happy that institutions like MIT, which have gone on to shape the world in many ways, and particularly the culture of MIT and economics, whatever it is, has led to so many central bankers and so many policy setters in the world of finance, has this not yet adequately celebrated history with the South Asian diaspora, who have had the luxury of attending there. And this archive brings that to light. I'm very happy that the institute, the departments, project, and then a relatively good link, Tamil Nadu, Madras, with IIT Madras. through that such an event takes place in this as opposed to any other place. So thank you all once again for inviting me, and I'm very eager, as the rest of you are, to see more about this. And I must conclude by congratulating Professor Iyer and all those who worked with her and the Institute at Cambridge, as well as IIT, Dr. Ponarasu.
Dr. Ranu Bopanna will introduce the film.
Thank you very much for inviting us to this event. It's our pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. Ranu Bopanna. I'm a graduate of MIT class of 1987 and the past president of the MIT South Asian Alumni Association. While I was president, I just began to think about when did the first JC come to MIT, and I was shocked to find out that it was all the way back in 1880. At that point, I said we have to have a project about this, and luckily I was able to find both Professor Iyer and Nareen Das. And this has been a true labor of love. We are so excited to be here today. I hope you get to see the exhibit, which is in the Heritage Center. I want to thank Mathandi especially for inviting us. We have a digital website. You can find films to tell the story, and I think you will really enjoy, I hope films, but you'll really enjoy this one. It's called Revolution on the Ganga. It's about the connection of MIT and the IITs, and you will find that IIT Madras
My father was an engineer, and I grew up surrounded by engineers. And to be honest, I actually thought everybody grew up and picked what kind of engineer they wanted to be.
Growing up, even before high school, I was quite interested in math, and I liked building things.
I like chemistry, so I did chemical engineering. And of course, I didn't quite realize there that chemistry has nothing to do with chemical engineering.
In 1968, India didn't really have those many higher education institutions. I was fortunate enough to get into one of these.
My mother was my biggest champion. She had gotten married at the age of 14 and did not have a chance to pursue a career.
My thought was that after I graduate from IIT, I'll probably get a reasonably good job. So that was the only thing. There was no, I did not play with chemistry sets. I did not make home radio sets. I did not think I was a whiz kid.
Engineers, ultimately, you're designing things, you're trying to build better systems that work for society.
KIAP, the Kanpur Indo-American program, turns scientists into practitioners, academics into diplomats, and engineers into revolutionaries. At the end of World War II, America positioned herself as the champion of the rapidly decolonizing free world. In October 1949, President Truman signed the International Technical Cooperation Act, marking a significant turn in American foreign policy toward engineering diplomacy. It aimed at curbing the influence of the communist Soviet Union in developing countries by offering them scientific and technical assistance. President John F. Kennedy expanded Truman's vision in 1961, establishing the USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. Kennedy sought a diplomatic opening to India through a USAID contract to support IIT Kanpur with MIT at its helm.
In Kanpur itself, KIAP, Kaya program, was a consortium of 9 American universities. Really the top universities, from this country, like besides MIT, Caltech, Princeton, Berkeley, etc.
The IITs were set up by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in the early 1950s to modernize India. He believed that engineers would reopen the window between India and the world through technology. But Nehru had publicly declared that India's foreign policy would not be dictated by the Cold War alliances of the American and Soviet blocs. Instead, he was keenly focused on steering India's industrialization through technological and scientific expertise with international assistance. Britain, Germany, and the Soviet Union supported the IITs in Delhi, Madras, and Bombay.
This was the period of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, and that really played a big role in this because the Soviet Union, Soviet engineers were on the ground in Bombay, and so Americans really wanted Kanpur to be sort of a symbol of American technological prowess and technological might. MIT, I think, always had a global vision of itself, its idea of using science and technology to build a nation, to develop industries, was really fundamental to MIT throughout its history.
Since the Second World War, when the radiation lab began to work with the US military, MIT had been closely associated with the United States government. Nehru had visited MIT in 1949, and when USAID offered the institute the Kanpur contract, MIT's President Julius Stratton sent Norman Dahl to India to advise him on whether or not to take this on.
The original director of IIT Kanpur, P.K. Kelkar, had this vision really of breaking out of older systems of engineering education, some that had come from the British, to really implement American ideas.
He thought it was such a great marriage between him and Kelkar, the director. Absolute meeting of minds. So he loved it, because that two of them together really built IIT Kanpur. What they wanted to do was to actually offer exactly the same curriculum that was being offered in MIT at that time. Right? So I'm actually a group of those students who got it 100% what was being done here. Exactly the same curriculum. The style of teaching, style of everything was so different in IIT Kanpur that most of us as students were just absolutely gaga. What is this place? The laboratories and libraries were open 24 hours a day. And I still remember going to the library and asking the librarian, how many books can I take out and for how long? She says, you can take out as many books as you want.
What the IITs did was take what was good about all of these other partners that they had and try to make something that worked in the Indian context.
Students at Kanpur thrived in the rigorous academic environment modeled on NIT. Dahl and Kelkar ensured that this was a truly equal partnership that avoided intellectual imperialism. This was an extraordinary achievement. They insisted that the American visitors were full-time staff and faculty, but their role, from conception to execution, was entirely advisory. Indians held a position of authority in decision-making, even as the Americans weighed in on curricular matters. The Americans took their families to India, sent their children to local schools, and helped build IIT Kanpur and its community brick by brick, person by person.
I was being taught by such enthusiastic and young faculty members. These people really wanted to see India succeed. And they were true academics at heart. So when they met Indians, right, they met Indian students and Indian faculty, all they saw was these wide-eyed, kids who were just extremely interested. I mean, these guys were not there for money. I mean, they were there because they wanted to set up something which will survive them. And they succeeded beyond their dreams.
When I was at Stanford, one of my professors at Stanford in the Aero department was Professor Holt Ashley. He had been one of the people from MIT who had been at IIT Kanpur when it was first set up. We had wonderful chat about how it was an exciting time and starting a new school in a country that was very much developing at that time. And since then it's paid off, where he was always very happy to see an IIT graduate.
The establishment of the Computer Center at IIT Kanpur in 1963, and this was really something remarkable. So a computer was flown in from the United States to Kanpur, and it really became a center of education.
The KIEP program was nothing short of extraordinary, becoming the most successful and long-lasting collaboration between India and America at the height of the Cold War. This was a particularly remarkable achievement at a time when India had doubled down on its policy of non-alignment and pursued a socialist model of economic development, much to the consternation of American statesmen. For close to a decade, revolutionaries deftly overcame these ideological battles. As Nehru's dream was realized, the lofty goals of the technological visionaries were put aside in 1971 as India and Pakistan went to war over the liberation of Bangladesh. American support for Pakistan, its Cold War ally, led to a US Senate vote to stop foreign aid appropriation to India. In retaliation, India stopped issuing visas to Americans and KIEP dissolved. But even as the Cold War chill asserted itself on Indo-American relations, MIT continued to be visible at IIT for long after.
People don't understand this fact that the American style of education, which is dominant in India now, really came out of KIEP. The Russian model, German model, all these models completely failed, primarily because there was no such involvement of the institution. There was no such involvement of the intellectuals from these places in setting up the program. They were set up much more bureaucratically.
Well, MIT has a very unique way of educating the students. So the students that come out of MIT are not only excellent in technology, but are also very practical. And so combination of innovating and applying that innovation to practical problems is what distinguishes MIT students.
There was a lot of stuff which happened in the MIT undergrad world, which had happened to me in the IIT undergrad world. So I think we were very well rounded and quite well versed in a variety of things which a normal undergraduate here was not well versed in. So I think that was a tremendous education, and at that time for very little money.
I think there were two things about my undergrad education that I really appreciated, which I realize now did have the MIT imprint and the MIT DNA in them. The first was that in the IITs, even though you choose when you start, the first year we moved doing the foundational classes, which were common across all the disciplines, sort of like the General Institute requirements at MIT. The second thing, and even more, as having graduated, I appreciate, is in the IITs we had to do humanities classes. Even though it was an engineering program, and that's something that at MIT too is, all students have to do a certain number of humanities classes.
How do you solve engineering problems in an extremely resource-constrained environment? And that is something which IITs taught us. I was working on autonomous vehicle projects, and even giving one component was very hard. One thing I feel that has helped the most is the confidence it gives you to go to IITs and the network of friends who are also doing amazing things everywhere in the world.
The IITs had been set up as elite institutions not intended for mass education. Only a tenth of those who applied got in, even in the KIAP years, and most of them were men.
In my class, there were 6 women and about 350 students. Oh, it was pretty rough. It was quite brutal, in fact.
It was the first time in my life when I was at IIT that I was the only girl in the class. None of the guys, no one would come and sit next to me. To be able to do just as well as a guy, I think was much harder because there was no teamwork, there was no support. And then, when I reflect back at that time, it used to kind of infuriate me a little because the guys would get a thrill out of taking the air out of our bike tires.
Most of the departments in at that time there were no women faculty members at all. And all of the boys would, they lived in the hostel together. Everybody in that department would be in the same hostel. They all studied together. They had papers from the previous exams. They had everything. You often missed it because you didn't understand exactly what that was about. So there were lots of things like that where you just, couldn't figure this out. You had to do it on your own. And then there was just the constant harassment and the constant the condescension, this constant undermining of your own self-esteem.
This was 1972. IITs had already parents went to university, and most of my class IIT whom I met, who had the opportunity for significant for IIT.
The competition to get into the IITs and succeed unevenly brutal and often invisible. Graduated. Others dreamed of the chance to go overseas for further studies.
In 60s and 70s, IIT, maybe 1,000, they were doing a pretty good job in bringing the state-of-the-art technologies. But we didn't have exposure to those technologies. When I graduated from IIT Chennai, I majored in electronics and computers, but I'd never seen a computer in my life before.
So at that time in India, the opportunities were far fewer than today. We had very good education at IIT, but research was not on the radar screen of any of the IITs at that time. Especially ours. More than 80%
and autonomous vehicle. And all these projects kind of inculcated a wish to do deep research. And US was one of the best places which has graduate research going on. So that was the big motivation. And not surprisingly, a lot of the graduates from my batch come to US for their PhDs.
The 1965 US Immigration and Naturalization Act opened up immigration and citizenship to Asians after nearly educated many at MIT.
Pivotal role. I did have very good grades at IIT. I did very well. So she said, don't stop here, keep going. And if you're going to do a PhD, go to the US.
Certainly the sequence of people coming for their PhDs and graduate work to the US was helped along by the fact that the curricula was well understood in the 70s by American universities. And they knew the quality of students they were getting were very good. And at that time the economy wasn't doing so well. So, you know, I worked there in Delhi for 2 or 3 years, then I worked in Bombay for a year. Then I said, okay, time to get a 1-year degree somewhere where I can really learn something different from what I've already learned. And MIT was offering a technology and policy program with me, which I thought was quite interesting and exciting.
You know, in the fact that I was the first woman.
I had my PhD thesis defense a year and 8 months into my PhD. And so I was really thrilled. I may still hold the record for the fastest PhD in engineering at MIT from start to finish. But probably I was the first Asia-born to be dean of any of the schools at MIT.
IIT visionaries not only created a revolution on the Ganga, but revolutionized technology and enterprise across the globe as IITians made their way to America.
In the 90s and 2000s, because the people who had come outside of India and proven themselves in US some of us became the best brand ambassadors for India in US.
I think the human experience and the things that you learn from either history or literature and, you know, things is really a large part of being able to build better products or better systems.
IIT and it shows everywhere. It shows in the faculty appointments for the country. It shows in the National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences. You know that how well these people have done, and so on. So I think we were trained well, and then we performed. So everybody won.
I now invite on stage Dr. Hamsa Balakrishnan, Dr.
going to be able to see the exhibition itself. But let me start by saying that it's really provocative to bring this film to IIT Madras, that the American model succeeded, but the German and the Russian failed. We'll have the here right over there, but we'll save that for after discussion. Start by asking to set the stage for the context. That in many ways people are transient, even people will pass. But I see this film as symptomatic of larger events in the ferment as you pass through. Different sets of people from different time periods testify to a whole set of events. I was sort of whispering to Mr. Ramaswamy over here that, for example, the gender situation in the IIT is now so complex, it's very difficult to be able to say it in a straightforward fashion. So perhaps, Srinath, if I could provoke you to say what happened in relation to the Cold War. We know that it's a competition, that it's not a straightforward American win, that there is an ideological fight going on around the same time. So if you could help us on the film and the exhibition.
One of the things about the Cold War, as far as India was concerned,